What happens when a cop pulls over the wrong woman? One who's calm, sober, and outranks him in every way that matters. This isn't just a story about a late-night traffic stop gone wrong. It's about what power looks like when it's weaponized by ego, and what restraint looks like when it's carried by someone trained to lead troops into war zones. He thought he was dealing with just another driver. She was a decorated lieutenant colonel, and she didn't need to shout to dismantle his authority. She just needed to press record. What started with a flashlight and a ticket ended in a courtroom, a public reckoning, and a reminder that silence isn't the absence of power. It's the warning shot before it lands. Keep listening, because what happens next rewrites everything he thought he controlled. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next part. It was just after 11 p.m. on a quiet Wednesday night in Toledo. The kind of hour where the streets are empty, gas stations hum under fluorescent lights, and headlights stretch like memory across the asphalt. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace was on her way home in a black government-issued SUV. Nothing flashy, just functional. Her uniform was folded in the back seat, her thoughts already halfway home, and her hands gripped the wheel like she'd been doing this her whole life. Because she had. After 2 decades in the military, driving alone at night didn't rattle her. She wasn't speeding, she wasn't swerving, but none of that mattered to the man waiting just past Reynolds Road, sipping bad coffee and hoping something would happen to make his shift feel less pointless. Sergeant Daniel Mercer saw an unfamiliar SUV and decided tonight was the night he'd matter. He pulled out fast, lights flashing before she even realized what was behind her. Adrienne eased over calmly, blinkers on, hands still on the wheel. She didn't flinch. She didn't fumble. She did what she'd been trained to do, stay steady. But Mercer didn't see a professional. He saw a target. No passenger side approach, no greeting. Sorted out, just a flashlight shoved into her face and a bark. "License and registration." She kept her voice even. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" He didn't blink. "You were drifting. Looked like you'd been drinking." She wasn't, and she said so twice. But he wasn't asking questions, he was giving commands. She handed over her ID and calmly noted, "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." He saw the words military and smirked. "Doesn't mean you're above the law," she answered. "I never said I was." That should have been the end, but ego doesn't like even ground. His voice climbed. "Step out of the vehicle." Her jaw tensed. "On what grounds?" "I've complied, I haven't been drinking, and I'd like to know the reason." He didn't give one, just yanked open her door. That's when Adrienne, steady as ever, hit record on her phone. "Just so we're clear," she said, "this conversation is being documented." His eyes flicked to the phone. Hesitation flickered, but not enough. "Out," he said. She got out. No shouting, no struggle, just silence and spine. Mercer made her walk the line under the hard glare of a street lamp like she was drunk, dangerous, disobedient. She walked straight, clear, steady, past everything. Still, he handed her a ticket. Failure to stay in lane. She took it without blinking because she knew what he didn't. This wasn't about a traffic violation, it was about control. And now, because he couldn't see past her calm face, her clear words, or the ID that said she wasn't just anybody, he'd started something he couldn't stop. Adrienne got back in her SUV and drove away, the ticket folded neatly on the seat beside her. She didn't feel angry, not yet. She felt something sharper, focus. Because she knew the road didn't end there. That ticket wasn't going in the glove box. It was going on the record. Mercer had no idea that the woman he tried to intimidate had spent her life commanding coalitions under fire and teaching soldiers how to survive chaos with clarity. He'd kicked dust on the wrong uniform, and while she didn't raise her voice, she did raise something far more powerful. Proof. And in a matter of days, that proof would speak louder than any badge ever could. Back at the precinct, the walls buzzed with vending machine hum and fluorescent fatigue. Sergeant Daniel Mercer sat in the break room with his feet propped up, sipping watered-down coffee and reliving the traffic stop like it was just another footnote in a long night. He leaned back, smirking as he recounted the moment to anyone who'd listen. "She thought she could flash some government ID and make me disappear," he said, shaking his head like the whole thing had been a minor inconvenience. Didn't say who she worked for, just tried that "I'm a federal employee" line. You know how they get when they think they're important. He let out a chuckle, loud and bitter. Didn't scare me none. Wrote her up like I would anyone else. He hadn't watched the footage. Didn't need to in his mind. He'd logged the stop like he logged every other one. Routine, impersonal, signed, sealed, and filed. Failure to maintain lane. Possible impairment. No arrest. He'd tossed the body cam into its charger and never looked back. The badge, to Mercer, was a final word, not a responsibility. He wasn't interested in nuance. He didn't do reflection. He did paperwork, citations, commands. That was how he kept score, not by asking if it was right, only if it was finished. But across the room, Officer Marco Diaz was quiet, his arms folded, face unreadable, something stirring behind his eyes. "You get her name?" he asked, voice even. Mercer shrugged. "Wallace. Adrienne Wallace." Said it like I should know who she was. Diaz's brow furrowed. "Wait, Wallace? Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace from Fort Wayne?" Mercer blinked, suddenly less smug. "I don't know, she was some lady in a black SUV acting like I was wasting her time." Diaz sat forward, his tone tightening like the air before a storm. "She's not just military, she's high command. I saw her speak at the academy last spring. Bronze Star, 2 tours." "She's the real deal," Mercer scoffed. "That doesn't mean anything to me. Not out here. Out there in the desert, sure, salute all you want, but on this road, I'm the law." His voice carried the kind of confidence that didn't grow from honor, but from habit. He didn't just wear the badge, he became it. And in his mind, there was no such thing as being out of line if he was the one drawing the line. The idea that someone, anyone, could outrank him, even by federal or moral standard, didn't sit well with him. It didn't fit the world he'd built, where obedience was expected and questioning was treated like a threat. Diaz looked at him for a long moment. "You sure you logged everything right?" Mercer waved him off. "Relaxed, I didn't arrest her, just wrote a ticket. She can take it to court if she wants, but I doubt she will. People like her, they don't want the trouble, they just want to feel big." He let out a humorless laugh and leaned back again. The sound echoed in the quiet, landing with a hollow thud. "She pulled rank, I pulled authority, end of story." But Diaz didn't laugh. He just stared at the charger on the wall where Mercer's body cam blinked with a silent red light. That camera didn't care about ego or instinct. It recorded what happened, what really happened. But Mercer didn't think about that. He never did. Mercer wore the badge like armor, but he never learned it was also a mirror. A badge can protect, sure. It can give you presence, command, fear. But it also reflects. Every action, every tone, every decision, it's all in the footage, the reports, the witnesses. He never thought twice about how he sounded when he barked orders or how close his hand hovered to his holster. He never thought about the woman on the other side of the flashlight. Just another stop, another ticket, another night. But Adrienne Wallace wasn't the kind of woman you dismiss. She was built from training, carved from years of order, discipline, and combat-tested logic. And while Mercer tossed jokes around like candy in a break room, she was already 5 moves ahead, aligning lawyers, evidence, and command channels that reached far beyond his jurisdiction. Still, Mercer didn't flinch. He stood by the story he told himself, that she was just being difficult, that her credentials didn't matter, that his gut was never wrong. Power without wisdom is like a loaded gun in a child's hands. Dangerous, loud, always looking for a trigger. And Mercer, blinded by habit and hardened by years of unchecked authority, didn't realize the trigger he'd pulled wasn't on a weapon. It was on himself. He laughed, tossed the body cam on the charger. Didn't know that little gray device was about to detonate his whole career. The video wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. No raised voices, no wild gestures, no violence. Just the sound of my breath. Me, calm, him, escalating. A flashlight beam cutting through the cabin of my SUV like it was trying to blind what it couldn't intimidate. I sat at my desk the next morning, watching it unfold again on my screen, frame by frame, minute by minute. There was no background music, no courtroom, no audio, just the truth, sharp and undistorted, his voice clipped and forceful. My answers, measured and restrained, the kind of restraint that only comes from practice, from a lifetime of being forced to swallow the insult and keep moving. I didn't watch it as a victim, I watched it like a commander reviewing field footage. What went wrong? What was said? What wasn't? I took notes, not out of emotion but from instinct. I'd led convoys through dangerous territory, briefed generals under pressure, handled crises with only seconds to spare. I'd trained new officers to keep their heads while others lost theirs. And now, watching Mercer pace outside my vehicle like he owned the night, I didn't feel fury, felt clarity, the same kind I'd taught 100 young recruits, especially the ones who looked like me, sounded like me, carried the same caution in their eyes. This wasn't about bruised pride. This was about precedent, about pattern, about power, how it moves, how it bends, and how it breaks when it's challenged by the one thing it never expects, a calm, prepared, well-documented refusal to shrink. This wasn't about me. It was about the uniform, the silence, the system. I wasn't angry for myself. I'd survived worse. I was angry for the private who's still too scared to speak, the young black airman pulled over outside base housing, the civilian spouse who was asked if the car she drove really belonged to her. It was all the little indignities we stack and carry until one night, one man with a badge decides he's the final word, and we have to decide whether to let it slide or plant our feet. I planted mine. Filing the complaint wasn't an act of outrage, it was a checklist. I downloaded the footage, copied my own video to a secure drive, called the JAG office at Fort Wayne and asked to speak with legal counsel. They called back within the hour. Captain Delaney Price reviewed the video with me, headphones on, her face unreadable. When it ended, she removed them slowly, steepled her fingers, and said, "Lieutenant Colonel, this isn't just misconduct. This might be a violation of federal use of authority guidelines. He had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, and he ordered you out of a government vehicle while refusing to cite a clear legal basis. That's not just wrong, that's risky." I nodded. "He opened my door without consent. That," she said, "could be classified as unlawful detainment, at minimum." We didn't speak for a few seconds. Then I leaned forward and asked the question I already knew the answer to. If this were anyone else, someone with no record, no rank, no resources, what would happen? She didn't flinch. "Nothing," she said. "They'd walk away with a ticket and a tight chest and try to forget about it." But I couldn't forget it. Not because of how he spoke to me, but because of how many people wouldn't have had the same control, the same calm, the same rank to survive it. Filing the complaint wasn't about revenge. It was about documentation, about pattern recognition, about ensuring the next time he reaches for the door handle, he remembers what happened the last time he confused silence with weakness. He held a flashlight, I held a record. He barked orders, I followed procedure. And now, the system he trusted to look away was going to have to look directly at him. I filed the formal complaint, submitted the footage, included my military record and position, sent it to the proper channels. Toledo Internal Affairs, the Department of the Army Inspector General, and, under the guidance of Captain Price, a civil rights liaison with DOJ oversight. The chain of accountability had begun, and I wasn't the one who had to raise my voice. I just had to follow the thread and stay the course. The paperwork moved fast. The footage was flagged, Mercer's name was tagged, and by the time he realized what was happening, the complaint had already reached the Inspector General's desk. And the evidence spoke louder than I ever had to. The envelope was light, plain, and unassuming. Just a manila folder with Mercer's name typed across the front like it was another routine memo. He tore it open in the parking lot without a second thought, expecting a department notice or maybe an overtime update. But the moment he unfolded the pages inside, his mouth tightened. A court summons. Civil rights violation. Plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Wallace. Allegations: unlawful detainment, intimidation, abuse of power. Mercer stood there, fingers twitching against the paper, eyes scanning the words like they were written in code. His chest tightened with something he didn't recognize at first. Not fear, but insult. "Unlawful detainment?" he muttered. "Are you serious?" He stormed into the building, the folder still in his hand, brushing past dispatch without a word. Captain Dan Reading was waiting. "Close the door," he said the moment Mercer stepped in. Mercer didn't sit. He tossed the envelope onto the desk. "What is this?" Reading didn't flinch. "That's a lawsuit, Dan. And it's real." Mercer scoffed. "I didn't arrest her. I didn't touch her. She's just upset I didn't roll out a red carpet when she flashed her credentials." Reading's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. She's not just upset. She's building a case. And she has evidence. From 2 angles. Body cam footage and her own recording. Mercer's jaw tightened. "You're taking her side now?" Reading leaned forward, voice low and flat. "I'm not taking sides. I'm looking at facts, and what I see is a woman with a clean record, a decorated military history, and 2 video files showing you opening her door without cause. This isn't going away. You need to understand that." But Mercer didn't understand. Not really. He'd written hundreds of tickets, pulled over dozens of cars that looked out of place, barked orders without being questioned. The badge had always been enough. The uniform, the belt, the routine. He didn't recognize what was happening now because it wasn't routine. It was scrutiny. The one thing his career had managed to dodge until now. In the following days, Mercer noticed the shift. It wasn't loud, no accusations, no confrontations, just silence that settled strangely in rooms where he used to own the air. Officers in the hallway stopped making eye contact. Conversations paused when he entered the locker room. He passed Diaz in the stairwell, usually quick with a nod, and got nothing but a clipped "morning." Even the new recruits, the ones who usually hovered around him like satellites, now drifted further. He still did the job, still wore the badge, but something was gone, and he felt it. Respect? Maybe. Or maybe just the comfort of not being questioned. Now he felt watched. Meanwhile, 2 hours south, Adriana was watching something else, her case file growing thicker, her legal preparation sharpening. She hadn't gone public yet. No press, no headlines, just documents, statements, timelines, evidence. She met with Captain Price again in a quiet corner office, file folders spread between them. "Are you sure you want to take this to court?" Price asked. "Once it's out, it stays out. There's no going back." Adrienne looked down at the statement she'd written by hand, her pen resting against the edge of the folder. "Let them see," she said quietly. "Let them see what happens when silence is broken." It wasn't vengeance, it was visibility. She wasn't out to destroy Mercer, she was out to dismantle the idea that people like him could move through the world unchecked, that routine abuse could hide in plain sight behind policy and posture. She wasn't doing this for one traffic stop. She was doing this for the stops before her, and the ones that would come after. She knew how the system worked. Knew that courts didn't always deliver justice, that verdicts didn't always teach lessons, but she also knew the weight of a courtroom, the weight of testimony, of video evidence played in front of 12 strangers with pens in their hands and questions in their eyes. Mercer thought the courtroom was a formality. I knew it was the reckoning. Courtroom is the one place where silence has to answer to truth. Not power, not status. Just the facts, naked and unblinking, laid out in full view. Adrian had seen what Mercer looked like when he thought no one was watching. Now she was going to show everyone. And Mercer, he thought it would be a slap on the wrist. He didn't realize the jury was about to hear every word he thought would never matter. The courthouse wasn't packed. No cameras, no reporters, no public frenzy. Just polished floors, hard benches, and the quiet tension of people who knew something important was about to happen. Adrienne walked in with deliberate steps, wearing her full uniform. No speech, no posturing. Just the silent authority of someone who had earned every stripe, every ribbon, every hard-won inch of the rank pinned neatly above her heart. The medals didn't clang. They didn't need to. Their presence was louder than anything Mercer had ever shouted. Heads turned as she passed, some in surprise, others in quiet respect. Even the bailiff's voice softened as he asked her to take a seat. Mercer was already at the defense table, trying to look composed, but his eyes flicked toward her with something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, just the dawning sense that he hadn't come prepared for this version of her. His lawyer leaned in to whisper, but Mercer didn't respond. Across the aisle, Adrian sat upright, composed, her lawyer, Captain Delaney Price, flipping through a notepad with quiet ease. The judge entered, and the trial began. There were no theatrics, just the slow unfolding of facts that had already been written, now read aloud so the world could see what silence had recorded. Adrienne was called first. She stood without pause, walked to the witness stand, and placed her hand on the Bible. Then she sat, straight as a beam, steady as a metronome, and answered the first question without flinching. "Lieutenant Colonel Wallace," Price began, "can you describe the night of January 17th? Adrienne's voice was clear. It was driving back from a military meeting in Indianapolis. It was around 11:15 p.m. I was in a government vehicle. I obeyed all traffic laws. I was calm, alert, and had committed no infractions that warranted a stop. She paused for only a second. Sergeant Mercer pulled me over and immediately escalated the situation. The jury listened, pens twitching. Did you cooperate? Yes. Did you provide ID? Immediately. Did you raise your voice? No. Did you ask why you were stopped? Yes. Twice. Calmly? Price nodded. What happened next? Adrienne's eyes didn't blink. He ordered me out of the car. Without giving a reason, when I asked for clarification, he opened my door and told me again. That's when I started recording. A murmur stirred, but the judge raised a hand. Silence returned. Why did you start recording? Price asked. Adrienne replied, Because experience taught me that staying silent doesn't keep you safe. I wanted a record, not of what I did, but of what he did. Then the lights dimmed slightly. The screen lit up. The video played. Adrienne's phone footage came first. Her voice measured, Mercer's tone sharp, his hand visible on the door handle, the flashlight moving aggressively across her dashboard. The room was silent. No coughs, no foot shuffles. Just the sound of Mercer's authority unraveling in real time. Then the body cam footage followed. Every barked order, every refusal to answer her questions, every silent cue that said, "You don't belong here, and I don't have to explain myself to you." The air in the courtroom thickened. When the video ended, Price turned toward Mercer. "Sergeant Mercer, why did you order her out of the car?" Mercer's lawyer objected. "Overruled." Mercer hesitated. She seemed resistant. "Did she refuse a command?" "She questioned me." The word dropped like a gavel. Price raised a brow. "She questioned you?" Mercer nodded. "Yes." "Did she break the law?" "No." "Did she threaten you?" "No." "Then why did you treat her like she was dangerous?" Mercer paused, visibly struggling. "Because she didn't act the way I expected." A few jurors glanced at each other. A ripple, silent but sharp. Adrienne watched quietly, not gloating, just listening, bearing witness. When asked if she had anything to add, she stood again. "Judgment without control," she said, "is just ego with a badge. The badge isn't a crown, it's a responsibility. If you can't carry the weight, you shouldn't wear the steel." The judge didn't respond. He didn't need to. The message wasn't for the bench, It was for the room, for Mercer, for the audience behind her who had seen too many headlines and not enough outcomes. Mercer didn't testify again. He stayed quiet, let his lawyer fumble through closing arguments, stumbling over phrases like routine procedure and reasonable suspicion. But suspicion only works when it's justified, and now the record was clear. Adrienne had not raised her voice, had not refused a lawful order, had not broken the law. She had done what the world always asks of people like her, stayed calm, respectful, precise, and yet she was treated like a threat, not for what she did, but for who she was. When the closing statements ended, the jury was dismissed. The judge adjourned, and the room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. Truth doesn't need applause, it just needs to echo. 3 days after the trial, the verdict came in. The courtroom was quiet, no media frenzy, no blaring headlines, just the hum of justice finally catching up. The jury found in favor of Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. Their decision was unanimous. Mercer had violated her civil rights. His actions didn't just cross the line, they ignored the map entirely. The ruling included a $35,000 0-cents compensation to be paid from the department's liability fund, but the money wasn't the point. The real blow came when the judge read the final clause aloud. The decision would be forwarded to the Department of Justice and the Toledo Police Department for internal review and potential policy changes. That ruling would live in the public record, attached to Mercer's name. Forever. Mercer stood there stiffly, trying to appear composed, but the weight was already settling on his shoulders. The courtroom didn't jeer, didn't applaud, but the silence itself was an indictment. He left through the side exit, flanked by his lawyer, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Outside, a couple local reporters waited near the curb, cameras half raised. Mercer didn't speak, didn't answer questions. He ducked into his car and pulled away without a word. Back at the station, his desk was cleared by the end of the week. Officially, they called it a temporary suspension pending internal review. Unofficially, everyone knew he'd been reassigned to a position without public contact. Some said it was a desk job with no badge. Others whispered his career was already over, just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Adrienne didn't watch the aftermath unfold on the news. She didn't refresh headlines or search her name online. She simply went back to Fort Wayne and did her job, the same way she had before, calm, focused, deliberate. She didn't want to be seen as a hero. She didn't need to be thanked. She had soldiers to train, missions to plan, logistics to coordinate. And she did it all with the same quiet fire that had carried her through the courtroom. But something had shifted. Not in her, but around her. Young soldiers began asking more questions. Female recruits stood a little taller in uniform, and when she spoke, rooms listened a little longer. 2 months later, she stood before a class of new recruits. Most of them were in their early 20s, fresh from civilian life, wide-eyed and eager. They expected war stories, maybe something about convoy drills or tactical maneuvers. Instead, Adrienne began with something else. "Let me ask you something," she said, her voice steady. "How many of you think a uniform automatically earns respect?" A few hands rose, hesitant, uncertain. She nodded. "I understand. The rank feels heavy. The boots feel official. But here's the truth. Respect isn't sewn into your sleeve. It's built. Every day, with every choice you make, especially when no one's watching." She paced slowly, her boots tapping lightly on the concrete floor. "The badge is not armor. The rank is not decoration. It's a test, every day, of who you are and who you answer to. Not just above you, but inside you." Her words settled over the room like dust on a battlefield. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. When an officer pulled me over for no reason, I didn't shout, I didn't threaten, I didn't destroy. I proved. That's the difference, and that's what leadership looks like. They didn't interrupt, they didn't fidget, they just listened. Because in that moment, she wasn't giving a lecture, she was offering a blueprint, a way to exist in power without becoming consumed by it. Sometimes, she continued, the loudest resistance is a calm refusal to disappear. When someone tries to reduce you to a threat or a stereotype or a mistake, they're not challenging your power, they're revealing their fear of it. She looked across the room and saw one young recruit, barely 19, sitting straighter now, eyes locked, notebook forgotten in his lap. That's who she did this for. Not for Mercer. Not for revenge. But for every recruit who might one day face the same flashlight, the same assumptions, the same silence, and wonder whether they should fight or fold. She wanted them to know there's a third option. With proof, with poise, with purpose. To when you're out there, and someone tries to reduce you to a title or a threat, remember Adria. She didn't win with rage. She won with record, with reason, with truth. And that is how power learns its limits. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.